On Xenovis 4.2, everyone learned the rule before they learned the roads. Never go near a Felkar den after nightfall. The rule wasn't written on colony boards or stitched into mission briefings. It lived in whispers passed from miner to medic, from scout to child, carried with the same tone people use for storms and sudden death. Lyra Kaiden broke it 3 months ago and it saved her life. Tonight, the crystalline forest outside Lida Grome's den glimmered under midnight frost, each branch coated in ice that caught starlight like shattered glass. The wind slid through the trees with a slow hollow and almost like breathing. Inside the den, the air was warmer, thick with smoke and the musky scent of fir and stone. A fire burned in a shallow pit, its coals glowing blue-white from the mineral-rich wood. Lyra sat close enough to feel the heat on her cheeks, far enough to keep her blanket from catching. Her thermowrap was patched twice, her boots still dusted with frozen grit. Across the stone floor, 3 Felkar cubs played like oversized puppies. Puppies had claws that could crack shale. They were already the size of grown humans, or thick shoulders and 2 large paws, their silver-black coats still marked by soft juvenile striping. They tumbled and growled and snapped their teeth at a strip of dried meat, yanking it back and forth with the seriousness of war. Lyra watched them with a tired smile. She didn't let anyone in the settlement see. This was the only place her breathing slowed. Grom had left its sunset silent as smoke, enormous as a moving shadow returning to the huntlands, with blood on his muzzle from earlier kills and the grim focus of an alpha providing for his pack. And he'd left his cubs with her, a human, a stranger, an impossibility. According to everyone back at the colony, Felkars were apex predators, intelligent, territorial. They didn't adopt. They didn't bond with outsiders. They tolerated at best. They killed, at worst. But Lyra had learned their language, the pattern of growls, the angle of shoulders, the stillness before a strike. She'd learned what a low rumble meant and what a sharp chuff meant. She'd learned that showing fear was less dangerous than showing disrespect. Most of all, she'd earned Grome's trust when she healed his mate too late to save her life, but not too late to ease her pain and keep infection from turning her final days into madness. That act had changed something. Grom had accepted Lyra into the pack in the only way his kind knew, by giving her a place and a responsibility. The cubs' place slowed as the hour deepened. Their glowing eyes, pale amber by day, dimmed toward sleepy gold. The youngest one, smaller than the others but all sharp spirit, crawled into Lyra's lap without asking permission, letting his head thump against her thigh like it belonged there. Lyra froze for half a second, heart stupidly full, then gently scratched behind his ear ridge. The cub released a pleased rumble that vibrated through her bones. She checked her chrono out of habit. La 0 EDCCTA. Tiny chill crawled up her spine. Not because of the time, because of the quiet. The den had its own sounds. Fire popping, cubs breathing, the occasional scrape of claw on stone. Even sleeping Felkars weren't truly still. But now something was wrong. A pause in the world. Like the forest outside, it stopped listening. Lyra's fingers tightened around the edge of a blanket. Grome's rule echoed in her mind. No weapons. Inside the den. Trust was absolute here, or it didn't exist at all. She told herself she was being paranoid. She always became paranoid when Grom hunted late. The colony's stories had sunk their teeth into her mind. Felkars weren't the only predators on Xenovis. Then she heard it, a scratch. Stone on stone, slow, deliberate, testing. Not wind, not an animal, not the cubs. The 3 cubs' ears snapped, upright in perfect unison. Their eyes flared brighter. Lyra didn't breathe. Another scrape, closer. Then a faint metallic click, sharp, to clean. Her hand slid toward the fire pit. The den entrance exploded. Stone fragments burst inward. Dust and ice sprang through the air. 4 figures flooded in through the widened gap, boots pounding, visors reflecting firelight. Tactical gear, breath masks, plasma rifles raised before their feet even cleared the threshold. Lyra's mind identified them. Before her fear could catch up, poachers, and not just any. The black market traders from Torn, the ones who sold Felkar hides like luxury rugs and cubs like exotic pets, 2 collectors who wanted something that could kill. She saw the insignia on their shoulders. Her stomach turned to ice. 3 of them looked barely older than 16 or 17, bodies too thin for armor that didn't fit. Ripe. The taller scarred across one cheek moved like someone who'd already killed without losing sleep. The leader. An easy raid. The colony would have said no adult, no real training. But plasma rifles didn't care about age. Lyra rose slowly, keeping her movements measured. She stepped forward until she stood between the intruders and the cubs, the youngest cub in her lap. Slid off quietly and crouched behind her legs, trembling. Lyra didn't look back. If she looked back, she'd show fear. If she showed fear, cubs would panic. The scarred leader tilted her head, mused. "Well, look at that," she said through a mask. Voice distorted but sharp. A human playing mother to monsters. Lyra forced her voice steady. "Leave now." One of the teenage poachers snorted, muzzle of his rifle wavering as he tried to keep it aimed. The leader raised her weapon, barrel steady as a promise. "Move aside," she said, "or we drop you with them." Lyra didn't move. Behind her, the cub's soft, sleepy noises turned into low, defensive growling of an inexperienced but building. The leader's gaze flicked past Lyra to the cubs. "So that's why Grome's been harder to track," she murmured. "He's got a human pet now." Lyra swallowed. Her ribs felt too tight. "They're cubs," she said, voice trembling only slightly. "They won't survive this, not against armed raiders." The leader laughed. "The last warning," she said, and squeezed the rifle tighter. Lyra's eyes dropped to the fire. She made her choice before her. Mine could argue. She grabbed a burning branch, white-hot at one end, smoke spiraling, and hurled it straight at the leader's visor. The leader screamed, stumbling back, swatting at the flame as it smeared across her faceplate. Chaos detonated. Lyra lunged. Her training was basic. Her body was human. Her odds were impossible, but she wasn't fighting like a soldier. She was fighting like something. Cornered, she slammed into the nearest teenager, driving him down onto one knee. His rifle clattered against stone. He swung wildly, fearful, clumsy. Lyra grabbed the rifle and yanked. For a breathless second, she had it. Then the weapon flashed red. Biometric lock. Useless. A boot struck her chest. Pain burst through her ribs like shattered glass. She hit the ground hard, breath tearing out of her lungs. The cubs sprang. They leapt at the poachers with teeth bared, claws flashing, but their movements were wild, not coordinated. They hadn't learned pack tactics yet. They weren't built for guns and nets. One poacher fired a shock net. The mesh flew like a glowing spiderweb and wrapped the youngest cub. The cub screamed, high, furious, terrified. Electricity snapped through the strands. Lyra's heart stopped. "No," she choked, and crawled toward him, palms scraping stone. She grabbed the net. Heat and pain blasted up her arms as the current bit into her skin. Her fingers refused to let go. She tore at the mesh anyway. Teeth clenched, vision swimming. A rifle smashed into her shoulder. Stars burst behind her eyes. Strong hands hauled her upright by her collar. Cold metal pressed to her temple. The scarred leader was back on her feet, visor scored, voice dripping poison. "Foolish human," she hissed. "You really thought?" Lyra closed her eyes, not to surrender, to listen. Because beneath the poacher's breathing, beneath the cub's snarls, beneath the crackle of the fire, she heard it, a low roar, so deep it vibrated through the stone floor, a sound that didn't threaten, it promised. The den entrance darkened. A massive silhouette filled it, blocking the starlight like a living mountain. Leader Grom stood there, over 3 meters at the shoulder, fur bristling, the black eyes burning like twin suns, muzzle stained fresh with blood from the hunt. He didn't pause, he didn't ask, he understood in an instant. Cubs in danger, pack member wounded, intruders. Inside his den, the temperature seemed to drop as if the air itself feared him. Leader didn't even finish her sentence. Grom moved. For something so huge, he was an impossible one. Blur of muscle and rage. His jaws clamped onto the leader's armor and flung her across the den like she weighed nothing. She hit the wall with a wet crack and slid down. Still. The others fired. Plasma bolts lit the den in violent blue flashes, scorching stone, sending sparks skittering. Grom was already among them. He tore through armor like thin cloth. A teenager screamed once, then stopped. Another tried to run, boots slipping on stone. He took 3 steps before Grom's weight crushed him. The sound final and ugly. The third swung his rifle like a club. Father Present lunged and sank his teeth into the poacher's leg, dragging him down. Grom finished it in a single strike. Silence slammed back into the den. The fire crackled. Smoke drifted. Blood steamed faintly on cold stone. Lyra was on her knees beside the youngest cub, hands shaking as she finally ripped the last of the shock net. "Freak!" The cub wheezed, then pressed his head into her chest like he was checking she was real. Lyra wrapped her arms around him, ignoring the pain, ignoring her torn skin, ignoring everything except the warmth of his breathing. Grom stood amid the ruin, chest heaving, eyes scanning for threats that no longer existed. Then his gaze landed on Lyra. She stayed still, exhausted, throat burning. Her ribs screamed with every breath. Grom approached slowly, each step heavy, controlled. Warm breath washed over her face, smelling of wild blood and frost. Lyra lifted her head. She expected anger or judgment. Judgment to that alien, terrifying calm felt used before deciding whether something lived. Instead, Grom lowered his massive head and gently, unbelievably gently, pressed his forehead to hers. A deep Felkar sign of respect, a mark of pack membership. Lyra's eyes filled with tears. She didn't wipe them away. There was no shame here. Her trembling hand rose and touched the scratched edge of Grom's muzzle. "I'm sorry," she whispered in their shared language of growls and breath and emotion. "I couldn't do more." Grom's response rumbled through her bones, so low it felt like the world speaking. "You did everything." Dawn arrived like a slow exhale. Pale light crept through the den entrance, turning the frost outside into a field of diamonds. The cubs pressed against Lyra in a warm pile, heavy bodies and steady heartbeats. The youngest stayed closest, curled half in her lap, purring deep and satisfied now that safety had returned. Grom stood guard at the entrance, a silent war of fur and dominance. The poachers' bodies were dragged far from the den, thrown into the forest as a warning. Not trophy. The settlers would come eventually. They'd ask questions. They'd whisper that Lyra was reckless, broken, insane. They wouldn't understand why a human would stay among monsters. Lyra watched the cub in her lap yawn, then nuzzled her hand like it belonged there, and she understood the truth that mattered. More than rules, more than fear, more than species. Family wasn't blood. Family wasn't DNA. Family was who you stood between and the gun.